Okay, so hello to everybody and welcome to Basemap. Thank you all for joining us today. My name's Emma Smith. I am the sales manager here, and Dan Saunders, who is our head of product, will be doing the webinar for us. We also have my colleagues from the sales team. We have Shireen and we also have Mustafa on the webinar too. For those of you that don't know, we are doing a prize draw for a free 2-day TRACC training course. There is a few terms and conditions along with that. All you need to do is email me back your interest. I will drop my email address into the chat during the webinar. And you have to be available on the dates of the 17th and 18th of October. And be available to join us here at our office in Guildford. So we will announce the 2 winners by close of business on Friday. Okay, so Dan, are you happy to start?
I'm more than happy, Emma. So yes, I'm good to go.
I can't hear Dan, can you? Oh, sorry.
Is that yes? Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Hopefully people can hear me. I'm nervous that people can't, so they can hear me. Can you put it in the chat that they can hear me? That'd be great. So today I'm going to be doing a demo of TRACC, and as part of this, I try to make it as interactive as possible and not death by PowerPoint too much. So if you have any questions at any stage, please put them into the chat or use the Q&A question and answer pane. I'll try and answer them as and when they come up. Hopefully Emma and Shireen will point me in the right direction of when they arise. So I am going to give a very quick introduction to who Basemap are. So we're an organisation that was set up about 23 years ago. We're experts in transportation data and software. We have a couple of very large transport data sets we manage. So we manage the data set called the Travel Line National Data Set, which is all the public transport timetables in Great Britain. End users are people like Google Maps who utilise that data, and we manage the coach data as well for central government. We also have average speed and speed limit data that's centrally purchased by the Geospatial Commission and then resold or given away to public sector via the PSGA, via Ordnance Survey. And then we have a product today, TRACC, that I'll be talking to you about. So TRACC is a very comprehensive tool that allows analysis of multimodal travel times. We've got over 1,000 users of TRACC worldwide. I've seen some people logged in, say good morning to some people, good evening to others, and good afternoon to others as well. We've got users from North America to New Zealand, and our client base kind of ranges from central and local governments to NHS, private sector, local authorities, and anyone in between. And it's used a lot to look at kind of major transport schemes around the world. But that's it for the PowerPoint side of things. And what I'm going to do is load up TRACC. Today, I'm going to be doing a demo on Sheffield. TRACC itself, I'm doing this on the desktop product. We do have other flavors of TRACC. We have a concurrent license and a web license, but everything I'll be showing today would have been completed on the desktop license here. So TRACC itself is meant to look and feel like a modern office application. So we have various tabs across the top. Each tab is a treasure trove of new features or functionality within the application. And at the moment, I'm doing a demo on Sheffield, and each one of these is effectively an individual project. As you can see here, I've got projects from Houston to Sheffield to Lancashire, anywhere like that. You can kind of utilize the data. So TRACC itself comes with no data, so we can load data sets into the system. So I'm going to start by talking about the public transport network or the public transit network, depending on where you're from. This data can come from 3 main sources. We can load data from ATCO-SIF, which is a standard used in the 2000s. We can load Trans-Exchange data, which is the kind of modern day XML variant, and we can load GTFS data. All these 3 data types are effectively digital timetables, and they're available quite often free of charge all over the world. So today I'm actually showing some data from our data cutter service that I've loaded into the system. Once the data is loaded, you can kind of see dots on the map. Each dot represents a transit mode. So anything that is green is a bus stop, anything that is black is a national rail, and we've got trams as well as part of it. And I've just brought in a background map. You can use something like ZoomStack that I'm using here, or you can use OSM or any other WMS feed you like in the system. Once you have the data in here, I can show you what kind of information we retain. So what I've done here is I've selected the stop in Sheffield, titled AG9. I can see the NAPTAN code. This is a unique code given to every stop in the country, or the stop name, or the stop ID. I can see this stop here consists of 4 different services, so service 20, 24, 785 and 25. I can see one of these is the inbound, these 3 are outbound direction. I can see the operator as well, and I can see it's a bus service. If I want to investigate this bus service more, I can click on it and see the inbound and the outbound route. I can interrogate the inbound route just here, where I can see all the stops and the order of where it goes. So I can see it starts adjacent Sycamore Road and it traverses all the way through to adjacent Gaunt Close, just over 16,000 meters in total. And I can see the timetable that is related to that. So here I can see that digital timetable that shows all the stopping patterns. So we'll come back to this later on. But in simplistic terms, what we've got here is effectively what someone would see when they go to a bus stop, or if you use Google Maps, it's the same kind of information in the background. We do also have a fare tab as well. In the future, there's a process called BODS, the Bus Open Data Service, and as part of that, it's mandated that every bus operator publishes their fares in a format called NetX. And as you can see on our page here, we've got a NetX importer, which means we can show bus fares within the system as well. Unfortunately, compliance with the production of fares in NetX by Department of Transport hasn't been where we'd like it to be at the moment, but in the future, we'll have 100% coverage of fares in the system as well. And so these green dots effectively shows us our transport network. We then have a road network. So road networks are really important within TRACC. It effectively shows us where we can walk, where we can cycle, where we can drive, and most importantly, where we can't walk, cycle and drive. So things like big fields or rivers or buildings, actually when you've got a detailed road network, it allows you to effectively route using that. We've got a few different sources of information we can use here. I'm using Ordnance Survey's highways and paths data as part of this demo, which is freely available to any public funded organisation. But we can load in other data sets, so Open Roads, OpenStreetMap. We can load in data from TomTom, INRIX here, or sometimes a local authority or a client might have a shapefile road network they want to utilise within the system. We can load that data directly in. And then once it appears, here we can see we've got all the information as you'd expect to see. I can then click on a road effectively to see the information of that road. To show me here, I've selected an A road, a primary A road. It's classified by Ordnance Survey. I can see the unique link ID. For anyone that's aware of unique street reference numbers, these are a collection of links that make up a road as assigned by Ordnance Survey. We can see the USRN that's been assigned to it. We can also see the road name, so Sheffield Parkway. We can also see it's a one-way road going in the A to B direction. So here we can see A to B, and we can see an arrow on the link that shows that. And we can also tie into speed data sets. So as I mentioned earlier on, we provide some average speed data into the PSGA, and we can load that data directly into TRACC. So here I can see that the speeds in kilometers an hour for the AM peak, the PM, the off peak, the evening, the night and the weekend. And I can see how the speed on that differs. So at night time, we've got a higher speed at 44 kilometers an hour, and the AM peak, we've only got 35. Now, if this was a bi-directional road, we'd see the speeds in both directions, which is a really unique selling point of TRACC, where we can see an A to B and a B to A speed. So we can see the speed going in one way and the other way. You'll also notice on the link we have a cycle speed and a walk speed, also showing on here. Now, what we have seen clients do is, especially in places like Sheffield, which is very hilly in locations, you can actually adjust the cycle speed to say, actually, if I'm cycling down a hill, I might be going quicker than 16 kilometers an hour, but actually going up that hill, I might be going a lot slower. And so you have that flexibility within TRACC to have that bi-directional speed on each link, and they can be edited at individual level as well as en masse as well. And that's our two main networks that we require. The next thing we specifically need to look at is an origin. So for the purpose of the TRACC, an origin is where that journey originates, where it starts off from. There's a few different ways in which this can be measured. I'm going to be first of all showing us a grid of points. And so what effectively I've done here is I've taken the Sheffield boundary as defined by Ordnance Survey. And then with that boundary, what I have done is I've taken the extent and filled it with a grid every 250 metres. Now, a 250 metre grid is kind of the Department for Transport kind of advised level at a suburban area. If I was looking at just Sheffield city centre, I might look at 50 metres. If I was looking at across the whole county, I maybe look at 500 metres. And TRACC gives you that ability. So in TRACC, I can either select a boundary or select an area, and then we have suburban, rural, urban defaults, or a custom can be created if required as well. So now what I've got is I've got 5,882 origin points, and this is where each of my journey times will be generated from in a moment. The next thing I want to specify is where we're going to. This is where we can use things like point of interest information. We can use the drawing functions to click on the map, or we can use the inbuilt geocoders. So if you have an Excel file or a CSV file, or even Access database, we can load that data directly in. What I've done is I've loaded the school locations in the Sheffield district boundary and loaded them into the system. And so there's 30 of those in total. And so effectively now what we're looking at here as a scenario is how accessible is Sheffield to secondary schools by public transport. So to do that, I can run a calculation. The main calculation we use and I'll be showing at the moment is the origin destination. We have 5 different flavours of this. So public transport only. This doesn't utilise the road network, so it allows users to walk across water or through buildings. We have public transport and the road network, which is the one that is used predominantly. So this is a merging of both your walk mode and your public transport mode. And then we have walk and cycle to cover off active travel modes. And then we have car as well. If you wanted to do car analysis or maybe compare car to public transport, that can be completed as well. So I'm going to do public transport and road network just here. I'm then going to specify which public transport modes I want to utilise. So I've got bus, tram, national rail. I'll ignore guided busway because that's for later on in the demo. But I could pick and choose which modes I want to use as part of that. As we're using a digital timetable, we can select which days of the week and which time period I want to look at. So I'm looking at schools. Maybe I want to do a 1 hour window between 7:45 and I want to be at that school date by 8:45. I can as well specify a minimum stop frequency. This effectively, not so much in city centres, but in rural areas would say, if I was doing a study over an hour long, it would only include services that have at least this frequency per hour. So in many rural areas, you might have a bus that runs once on a Tuesday afternoon, and then not again for the rest of the week, and actually randomly may catch that as part of this calculation. By selecting this option, it will remove that kind of outlier from the results. We can also on this gauge here choose the directionality of our calculation. So when looking at access analysis, we really need to look at both of these. So outbound is getting to the locations. So in this example, going to school. Whilst an inbound would be that return leg of the journey. Lots of places, as I mentioned before, you might have an obscure bus service that may allow you to get to a location in the morning, but that bus might stop at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So looking at an inbound and looking at 15:30 to 16:30, you can get a true view of access, looking at both going to that location and that return leg as well. As we'll notice here, we've got DRT, demand responsive transport or flexibly routed services. We can code these and create these in the software if we wanted to. So these are becoming more and more popular to supplement fixed route services. So we can select it here and create it. I'm not going to talk too much about demand responsive within this webinar, but if it is of interest to you, please kind of reach out and we can talk about that in more detail. But we can effectively choose all these modes. We can then go next. We get a few options in here. I'm not going to go over them all or just highlight some of the important things. So the first thing we can effectively choose here is limit number of destinations per origin. So when the Department for Transport have used TRACC to do the national journey time statistics, they look at every output area centroid. There's about 180,000 of those in England, going to, for example, every primary school, and there's about 17,000 of those. Now, what this can do is you can say, actually, I don't want to know access to every 17,000 primary schools. I can say, I only want to look at access to the 10 closest ones. So it reduces the amount of calculations that are being done. The thought here is that effectively you don't need to know access from Newcastle to a primary school in Cornwall. We could choose to limit how far an origin can be from a road. So 800 metres is a default. All these settings have been used in the previous National Journey Time statistics run by the Department for Transport. So they've been emulated as the default settings within TRACC. But this 800 metres says that if that origin point or the destination point is more than 800 metres away, it will show as inaccessible. When you get to the public transport parameters, the internal connection distance is the interchange. So that interchange can be on the same mode or different modes. So maybe an interchange could be at a bus depot going between two different bays, or it might be going from a bus stop to a trailing station. And so we have a 500 metre default maximum interchange distance, which is about a 10 kind of minute kind of distance. Actually, about 5 minute kind of distance as part of it. We could choose a minimum wait time, so that's default to 5 minutes. So if I do that walk and I get to the bus stop at 8:30, I won't be able to get another service until 8:36 because I need to have at least a 5 minute gap to allow someone or a bus to run late effectively as part of it. That interchange time will also include the walk time as part of it. So if you walk for 3 minutes, the penalty will be on top of that walk time. We can choose here maximum distance to first stop. So this effectively is the maximum walk time to get to a bus stop location. So 2,000 metres is about a 20-minute walk. So this goes from that blue dot to get to a bus stop. If you have no bus stops within that 20-minute walk, that will show as inaccessible. And this also works at the other end of the journey for the destination as well. Now we see people changing this in urban areas to 400 metres, 800 metres, and that is done quite a lot by users as part of it. We also see the maximum number of interchanges. We can say actually when we look at direct services, so no interchanges or 2 interchanges or something like that, which will mean the algorithm might say it takes slightly longer, but maybe it's a more realistic view of access afterwards. We could choose here to use a road network for internal interchange. What this effectively will do is means that 500 metres is based using the road network as like it to do. We can choose to do that as the crow flies if for some reason we wanted to do that. We then go next, we get a few settings here. We can save our OD path files. I'll come back to those later on, but this is effectively a CSV file that saves the exact journey that is made for each of the ODs, so origins to destinations. We can do a direct export to CSV if required, so that won't come back into the database. We've got our result name just here. We can batch runs, so I can set 4 different runs up and then run them overnight or over a lunchtime period. If I'd specified an OD matching, which effectively matches an origin to a destination as opposed to doing it to everyone, we could specify to utilize that here. And we could use our enhanced output that again I'll come back to later on, but gives us more than just a journey time for that. I'll then go next, it'll give me a summary. I'm doing 5,800 origins to 30 destinations. So that's going to give me an OD pairing of 176,000. So that's the amount of calculations that's about to be completed within TRACC. We quite get often asked, what's the largest sort of OD pairing that TRACC can utilise? We've had people use OD pairings into the 750 million, 800 million on kind of server machines. So there's not really a limitation. We've done runs across the whole of Canada, obviously England-wide, Department for Transport. Scale really isn't an issue with TRACC, as long as you put enough resource into it. So what I've done is I've prepared a result just here. I've actually got it based on 2023 data, so we can see what maybe 30-minute access to schools looks like. Here I'm choosing to the visualization as a contour, up to 30 minutes. You can choose to do it as a thematic map if you'd like as well. And what this is now doing, if I turn off this grid of points just here, I'll just turn this off here, we can now see accessibility to secondary schools using public transport within Sheffield, up to 30 minutes. We can see our breakdown here, so we can see areas that are 10 minutes away, up to 20 minutes away, and up to 30 minutes away. And this is used a lot to look at things like 20-minute cities, 15-minute neighbourhoods, things like that, when you start looking at access and working out how accessible places are. Now, if I load the grid back in, we can see visually what kind of area of coverage is done. And so you might think actually visually looking at this, maybe 50% of Sheffield lives within 30 minutes of a secondary school. But we're just going to keep that in the back of our minds for the moment. We're actually going to work out that exact number in a moment. Now, one of the big uses of TRACC is to do kind of ongoing monitoring of accessibility. So what we can also do is load in different public transport networks. So I've got Q3 2023 data, but I've also loaded some data for October 2022 and also 2020, so pre-COVID. And you might have seen in all the news, everyone is saying that buses have been slashed post-COVID. You know, the buses are nowhere near the frequency, offering the same levels of access as they have done previously. So what I did is I've done a study looking at 2020. So again, I can do a 30-minute banding here. And if I turn this off and turn this on, you can see some small differences, but not a great deal between the two. Actually, we can. Sorry, it's a 2023 looks like this, and 2020 looks like this. So we can see a large area that isn't available in 2023 was available in 2020. So we can see that difference just here. Now we can also do is look at 2022 to see how that access is. And this is what we have many local authorities are doing. So they're looking at ongoing monitoring of access, not just to things like schools, but to healthcare, to employment, supermarkets, to food stores, to gyms, to green spaces, and seeing how that transport network works. And then looking at how effectively improvements can be made. So here we can see access again in 2022, 2020, and 2023. So here it actually looks like 2020 has the best amount of access, 2023 slightly less, and actually there's not a lot of difference between 2023 and 2022, just small variations running outside. Now what we can then do is really delve into this in a bit more information. So we can use census, we can use demographic data as part of it. It's actually one of the best times to use demographic data now. We've just had the census 2021, was released last year. It's now on our data cutter service. And from that, I can load in information such as 11 to 15-year-old data. So these are the age ranges of people that be looking to utilise these services as part of it. And the great thing about the census is you've got various different demographic information in there. We can also load in things like mosaic data or other type of census information all over the world, just to really kind of enhance the outputs. Once you have the census data in the system, we can effectively analyse it using a demographic data report just here. So effectively, I can look at the whole area and how many people can get to a school in 10, 20, and 30 minutes. I can choose to look at the whole area or I can break it down per school if I wanted to. But I'm using the whole area in 10, 20, 30 minutes as part of it, and the sum will be the amount of people as opposed to the percentage. It's a percentage. I can choose 11 to 15-year-old, and I can repeat this 3 times to look at what the result might look like. So effectively, this is what I've got here. I've got a report effectively. If I make this a bit bigger, we can see the percentage in 2020 that could get to a school was 25%. Within 10 minutes, it's 27% in 2022 and 26%. In 20 minutes, it shoots right up to 86, 87, 87. And within 30 minutes, 97s between the 3 of them. At the bottom here, we can see a sum of the amount of 11 to 15-year-olds, again, representing the same kind of levels. And as we've exported this to an Excel file, we can also create a chart that effectively shows that information to us. Maybe not the best of charts, because you can't really see the difference in the thing, but we can kind of see these examples being shown. So again, we can see visually that maybe 50% of the area is covered by a contour. If anyone knows Sheffield, a large proportion of Sheffield is the moors or isn't effectively got anyone living there, which is why we're having this different view of access as part of it. So effectively, this is the kind of bread and butter of doing kind of ongoing access plans or monitoring how accessible a city is as part of it. Any contour we have within the system, we can save back out. We can save a layer out as a shapefile. And that allows us to interact with things like Esri or MapInfo or QGIS or any other kind of GIS platform that someone would like to present the results in as part of. So that's kind of the main type of analysis that can be done. Where TRACC can come into its own is where we start doing the what if scenario. We start throwing different scenarios into the software. So to do this, I'm gonna bring down our access just to be into Sheffield city centre. I've done the same calculation again, exactly just to the smaller number of schools. So we can get 3 bands at 10, 20 and 30 minutes. And this is now showing us that same kind of travel time contour. It's a lot more locally. I'll turn the origin points off here. On a smaller scale now, I'm zoomed in, we can start seeing where we have good levels of access. So we can see around train stations or bus stops, we've got good levels of access. And here we can see in the middle of fields, in the middle of housing estates, effectively have poorer levels of access. And this is because people have to walk through that road network. It's so important when doing these calculations to get to that bus stop. I mean, the great thing about the OS highways and path data is it has all those cut-throughs and alleyways in there. So all that data can be included as part of it. So this is what our kind of study is at the moment. With the smaller thing, I'm going to show a couple of other options we can do. So if I wanted to work out access just to All Saints and Sheffield Park Academy, it's that same result, but I can actually create a brand new contour showing access just to these. And this can be done if you're looking at maybe closing a site down and working out what access would look after that site has shut. We can start looking at the information, again, tying in demographic data to work out how that variation happens. So we can see this query. We've got a great case on our website that was done by Staffordshire, where they effectively did something like this, where they looked at access to all of the primary schools within Staffordshire, and then produced a walk zone map using the walking function within TRACC. And they used this export contour per destination option, which then gave them hundreds of different shapefile contours. They could then load into their mapping software to produce a 10-minute walk zone map that went into every new starter's kind of guide. It helped, I think it was, do a 27% modal shift from parents dropping off kids in the car to walking, and also promoted park and stride for parents to park 10 minutes away, remove that congestion at the school gate, and allow people to kind of stride in that final kind of 10 meters as 10 minutes as part of it. Another output that we can do within TRACC is, we call it a destination catchment, quite apt for when looking at schools. So lots of times school catchments be done based on a straight line, but if we're really trying to promote access using public transport, sometimes this can be a better way of looking at it. So what we've got here is various different colours. I'm just going to change one of these greens to be orange, just a bit clearer. That'll do. So effectively here we can see each of our schools, and the colour is based on where you live, what's the closest school to get access to. So this is schools, it's been used for things like COVID vaccination centres, GPs, anything like that. And the great thing about public transport is actually geographically, so as the crow flies, you might appear to be closer to one location. But when you start plugging that into public transport routes where you've got nodes or stops that could travel great distances, especially for trams and trains, you get a different view. So here we can see UTC's Sheffield City Centre, which is right near all the main transport locations. We can see it has a really far-reaching place. And we can see gaps appearing between. So this kind of Astra Academy, again, is near a train station, so we can see these areas that are travelling to get there. So again, a different view of access as part of it. The other thing we do for looking at improving access is looking at the adjustment of our network. So in this example, I'm going to be showing us how we can create a brand new bus route as part of it and how we can analyse that. So within TRACC, it's a very, very simple thing to do. We can go to our PT network, and then we can go to our stops and create some brand new stops if we wanted to. So I can target an area if I wanted to as part of it. Effectively, I can click a stop location, give it a name, I'll just stop 1. If I knew what a nap time goes to be, I could enter it here. If I go save, it will then create that stop in the system, and it will then effectively be in system ready to use. So I could do that. I can click on the locations and update the easting and northing positions automatically. If you know the easting and northing positions, you can enter those in. So you can start doing this and building up your route and building up your service as part of it. Once I have all my stops within there, I can create a brand new service. So I can call this a D2. I can see a travel mode, so maybe I'm created a guided busway as part of it. I can give it an operator name, so Dan's, and I can save that. And then I can start creating my new route. So here I can go add, I can type stop 1. I can add, type stop 2. And I go add, and I go stop 3, and I go so on until effectively I create a whole new route. So effectively, put D1 that I prepared earlier on. I'm just going to copy that. So eventually I'll end up with something that looks like this. So I've got stop 1, stop 2, stop 3, stop 4, stop 5, stop 6, and stop 7, and stop 8. And I can see effectively where it's linking its way through into one of the school locations as part of it. I give it a name, so it's my eastbound service. I get a distance here at the moment. Now what I can do is I can update this distance to effectively create a route line. So at the moment you can see the route is 13 kilometers long. But actually what happened here is once this route line has been created, we'll see that these distances then become from straight line to real world distances. So we can see now our route line following the path takes us over 14.5 kilometers long. What we can then do is I can save that. This can then be exported out as a shapefile. So if I want to include that route line as part of a report, that can be completed. I can go to my timetable. I can see it's blank at the moment. I have nothing there. Now, if I know what my stop order is going to be, I can go add and I can input the times manually, but I don't, and I don't want to run a bus through there. But what I've got is I've got this lovely speed data I can utilize. So what I'm going to say is actually I'm going to use that column AM peak. My first trip is to depart at 7 AM. If I was doing a tram or anything like that that's going on the road, I can specify the default speed of that service. So maybe it's 30 kilometers an hour. I can say how long is it going to take to school pickup service. It's going to take a minute at each stop. And because I'm doing a bus, I'm going to say it's going to use the road network just here. If I then go OK, as you can see, very, very quickly, it's told me that this route's going to take 42 minutes in the AM peak to complete. I can edit it. I can specify a date range. Maybe this is going to run between these two dates, and it's a school service only. So maybe this is run Monday to Friday. I'm going to go OK. Now maybe this is going to run every 30 minutes from 7:30, because I've already got 7 o'clock in there, until 9 o'clock. That's every 30 minutes. If I then go OK, it'll copy them times and will import the data here. Now, if I thought this is wrong, so this is actually going to get here at 8:32, I can just update that time doing it this way. Or if I wanted to, for example, highlight these and just say, actually, these are going to take one more minute to get there. I can go add, and I'm not sure if we saw that, but added 1 minute into the times as part of it. So if you put all this information in, it's very, very easy to do. Now we can do further analysis on that if you wanted to. So we have our D1 service that I've exported out. So anything we do in the software, we can save a service out as a trans exchange or an ATCO CIF file. But here's that service just here, D1. I can see the service itself. I can see the route as part of it, and I can see the timetable that I've saved as part of it. I can see that route line. We can then maybe find out how many people live within 400 meters of that bus route. And so to do that, we can use a slightly different calculation called local accessibility. I'm just going to hide this one for the moment. And our local access will then look at, for that route, what the distance is away. So I can say on a Tuesday between 7 and 8, I'm going to go to 0 an hour. Go next, I'm going to say using the road network, find me ever up to 800 meters away. I also then do is I'll analyze this to bus route, and it'll create me a contour showing what the catchment is within 400 meters and 800 meters away from it. Obviously, this kind of goes into planning policy guidance of that new development should be within 400 meters of a bus stop. And so you can do this at a local level, and in a minute I'll show it across the whole network as part of it. But we can actually look at that information just here. And then what we can do afterwards is we can analyze it using demographic data to find out how many people are within these distances. So let's wait for this to run through. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, and then we've got effectively our result. So we've got our local access one of interest here. I can do 2 contours showing 400 meters away and 800 meters away. And now we can see around each of our stops. So we've got 2 stops that are quite close together here. So maybe that would look at doing a redesign as part of it. But we can see all this information just here. We can use our demographic data to then delve into that in a bit of a better kind of view. Effectively what it shows me now, here's my 8 stops I created a moment ago. And this is our distance in meters, so 400 meters and 800 meters. I've done all people as part of this. Maybe I should have done it for 11 to 15-year-olds, but I can see there's 4,000 people within 800 or 400 meters away from these stops. These obviously in a very, very rural area. But we can see how that kind of changes as we kind of go through. We can see that stop 8 in city centre has 145,000 people around that location. So right in the city centre as part of it. So we see all this information coming out against each of the stops, and in the future release we're effectively looking at includers into the service information. So you have to see that when designing a route, actually what the catchment is like around each of the stop locations. So now we've got our new route, we can see how many more people will be covered as part of that. We can then redo our analysis. We can see actually how many more people are now affected by the new service. So again, we have our results. We now have our with guided busway, and then we can do 3 bands showing 10, 20 and 30. And hopefully now around Hollow Meadows and around this sort of side, we can see that contour travelling out. Again, I can turn this layer on and off to see the difference that the new bus route is making. And again, we can use demographic data to further analyse effectively the difference in the two. So I think this is the one just here. And here we have the amount of people before and after that are affected. So before there was 19,000 people within 20 minutes of a school. Afterwards, you've got 20,000 people. So we've got a difference there of 193 to 204,000 people. So we've got different 11,200. Over 40 minutes, we see it's 1,900 people, and over an hour, we see that's 281 people. So what we're seeing there is actually in a 20-minute period, because we've got a very, very fast express kind of bus route, there's a really high effect within 20 minutes. But actually, people in the outskirts could have got to school within 60 minutes. So actually, that effect is negated quite a bit because over an hour, because people could get there, but actually journey times have been reduced as part of it. So we can see all that information being produced within TRACC. It's going to be done for walking analysis as well, to look at before and after effects of that. So we can put in new bridges, or we can put in new footpaths to see how access is. So here's a walking map showing maybe 15 minutes to schools. Then you can actually see how that's affected as part of it. As again, walking looks a bit more like a bullseye, because generally the closer you live, the quicker the journey time. But again, you can see where you've got barriers of access as part of it. Another thing we can do as part of our kind of data is we can look at something called corridor analysis. And what corridor analysis will allow us to do effectively is say we're doing some changes to a specific area. This is actually a request that was done by one of our clients. We wanted to find out, they're getting asked more and more, actually, if we are maybe putting a bus lane in, or maybe if we are affecting the data in some other way, maybe there's some roadworks going on. Can we quickly and easily analyse that? So what we can do is I can draw a route, excludes the roughness just here, but I can click a route. I can choose to increase my buffer if I wanted to get both sides of the road. And I'll say actually something's happening on this road just here. This road is changing. So I can open my timetable editor and say, right, all the bus services from Monday to Friday between 7 and 3 p.m. are now going to take 5 minutes longer to go through here because we have roadworks going on. Or maybe we're going to put bus prioritisation along this corridor, put a bus lane in, so it should take 5 minutes less. We could put either one of those in, because the happy scenario or the other scenario. I can say this is going to update the rest of the route. I then go next and work out which services have been affected. So that's my D1 service that I created earlier on. And these are the two stops that sit within it. So I'm going to say both of these were affected. I can then go next. What this will then do is it will look at the trip times as part of it. It will then work out effectively the new timetable as part of it. And then it will then effectively give me a query that shows you what the new updated times would be. We'll also see here we've got something called backwards timing error. So if for any example we're doing a minus and suddenly a timetable will go backwards in time, it would flag up just here. So it wouldn't allow us to do that, but we then get the option underneath to edit that data if we wanted to as well as part of it. Now, it's important to stress any changes they make to the public transport network are only done within the project. The changes don't happen anywhere else in the system. Everything is done, so any original CIF file, transit change file, GTFS file will not be edited. And as you see on my PT network, I've got various different tabs, different data sets, so you can have different scenarios loaded into the system if you wanted to. Have a quick sip. So this will effectively run through. And then it will give me an update at the bottom. It's taking slightly longer than I'd hope, so I'm going to cancel that right now. But effectively, that's how it would work as part of it. So that's kind of it on the editing side of things. Another thing that's worthwhile looking is different types of origins we can use. So what I've got here is S1 postcodes. So I've used the geocoder to load in points of information. And now what we'll talk a little bit about is the reporting aspects within TRACC. So again, I've done a normal calculation, but this time what I've done is I've looked at access to my 6 schools, but using my postcodes for S1. This time we'll do a thematic map showing journey times up to 40 minutes. The maximum is here, so 10, 20, 30, 40. And here we can now see each dot is coloured in differently based on its journey time. Now this actually gets more interesting when we start exporting the results out. So what we can do here is export the results out. I'll just do it actually fresh. So what we'll then do is an enhanced output will give me the results. At the moment, we're only seeing one result on the map, but we actually have 6 destinations that sit in the background. So what I can see here is I can see for each of my origin points at the top, as you can see, I get the summary of what's been done, so tram, national rail, what the maximum journey time, the minimum journey time are, all the settings I use, I choose A745 to 845. And then I get down here the origin ID. So this is the first postcode that I had. And you'll see there's 6 entries for it. And the 6 entries represent each of my destinations, so each of my schools just here. I can see the name of those. I can have a description. I have a coordinate of where that sits. We have is a direct walk flag. So if you live right next to a school, you don't need to use public transport. This will then appear as true. So we've got one just here, over 3 minutes away. We see the normal travel time, number of interchanges. If we then try and find one that's got an interchange. We've got 2 that have been changed once. If we get an interchange, we'll get the wait time. This wait time is how long is spent waiting between 2 services. We're going to get a walk time, so how much time was spent walking as part of that journey. How much time was spent on each mode. So this was only on a bus, I think, as part of it. And then we get the walk time at the end. So we see all this lovely information that can be produced out of the software. And so this example here, we've got just over 2,900 rows of data that can be interrogated. We see people load this into SQL. We see people use this to power things like car parking permit allocations where they've plotted in their locations of staff members and they've worked out their travel times and they've worked out if they get there on public transport, they don't get a car parking space and travel plans and things like that as well. If someone then turned to me and said, actually, although this took 19 minutes for origin 2 to destination 4, can you show me that in a bit more information? We can use the OD path files to actually break that down. So I can then come back into TRACC. I can go to OD path files, origin 2 to destination 4. I get a summary. It's just a CSV file, but I'm going to load it back in. X and Y. I can go finish. I can choose to save as a shapefile if I wanted to, but I'm okay. I'm then going to style this so we can see it a bit clearer. Zoom to this layer. And I can see the exact route that was undertaken. So what we can also do is we have a data view within TRACC. And this data view effectively allows us to do is highlight the whole of that route. And that's to preview that CSV file. So I can then click on each step. If I double click on one of these, it will zoom to that location. As part of it, so I can see we had a 3-minute walk where we got on the Yorkshire Supertram. We got on the Supertram at 7:52 in the morning. So that's a Yale service. We stayed on here until 13 minutes. So we got off at this location just here. And as you can see then, we had a detailed walk where it got to 19.85 minutes to get through it. And what our preview here is showing us is every different road mode they walked through to get there, including cut-throughs and things like that. I'll be talking about new features bit in our next release. This will be a line, or can be chosen as a line, so you actually get a route line that comes out of how someone's done that journey. And so the reporting is a really important different way of viewing access as part of TRACC. So we can also do other types of calculations within TRACC as well. So I touched upon local accessibility earlier on. So we can do local accessibility on mass, so we can do it across the whole of the city centre if we wanted to. And so effectively we could say, right, show me areas of Sheffield that are in 400 metres or 800 metres of a bus stop. So we can do that. I did one earlier on. I chose one using 6 services per hour. I will just highlight these settings again, just to show what they do. So here we have this frequency, so I can set it to 6 per hour, which means that for everyone who's asked between 7 and 8 and 8 and 9 has to be at least 6 services per hour. We have a service frequency that looks at an individual service, or we have a combined stop frequency that has all the buses, all the services that call there. And then we have these settings that I spoke about earlier on. So then we can do a calculation as part of it and show effectively what that looks like. So I can do 2 bands at 400 meters and 800 meters. And now if you're a developer looking to do some development and you want to find out which areas meet that kind of criteria, any area we can see that is red is effectively an area within 400 meters of a bus stop with a high-ish frequency, so 6 per hour, and anywhere in blue is 800 meters away. And as part of it, as you saw there, you can do it by different modes. So as the planning guidance states, you know, you've got 400 meters to a bus stop, but you've got train stations at a different distance and trams and tubes at different distances to give you different analysis to work that out. We can also use the software to actually look at the frequencies in a bit more detail. So if I wanted to find out across the whole of Sheffield what the frequency was of buses on a Tuesday between 10 AM and midday, again, I can choose the combined or service. I can choose it thematically or direct to CSV export. I'm just going to do a thematic view of this. This will then query my public transport data to work all that out. I can maybe choose 4 bands, so one could be up to 1 an hour, one could be 6 an hour, one could be 12 an hour, and then we have up to 49. Now we can see across the whole network we've got high frequency bus routes. So if we start from the top, but anyway, you can see here that's blue. We have at least between 12 and 49 buses an hour. The 49 will probably be the drop off in the Sheffield bus depot. But we can kind of see the information just here. Showing that we can then see 6 to 12, so we can start seeing what arterial routes are coming. If you want to put a new service in, you can use it to work out actually do we have capacity on the roads to put more buses on there. This is our between 1 and 6, again fast areas, and this is our 1 service an hour. So again, starting looking into the rural kind of moors kind of area and things like that. And then we see that's green at the moment has a very infrequent service, not at least 1 per hour between these locations just here. So again, just giving a slightly different view of access as part of it. Leading on to this a bit more, we can do something called a PTAL. This stands for Public Transport Accessibility Level. This is a method that's been championed by Transport for London since the 90s. It's used effectively as a way of creating an accessibility score. It works really well in urban areas, not so much in rural areas. And how it works, it looks at this origin point that we had earlier on, and it looks at that origin point and how well it can access transport. Doesn't matter where that transport is going, but what it's effectively looking at is how well can I access transport. So it looks at, for example, bus stops that are in 640 meters, trams that are in 960, and a national rail that are in 960. Is a reliability factor against that. And it'll assign a score based on how many bus stops, tram stops, and national rail stops are within that catchment and what the frequency of them are. So if you have access to a lot of stops with a very high frequent, you'll get a very high PTAL score. And if you get access to not a lot of stops that have low frequency, you get a lower PTAL score. And again, we can use our digital timetable to choose a time period you want to do the analysis. We can choose to save the metadata, which will show us how the PTAL score was calculated. And again, this appears in our PTAL result just here. And so effectively how this guidance works is anything that is a 1A or 1B is deemed as being inaccessible for planning in the current guise, and anything up to 6A, 6B is the most accessible. So anything here we can see that's highlighted right now is deemed to be in an accessible location. Now the caveat here is if you were to live near a bus depot or a train station that's got a high frequency number of services, or an airport where lots of transport is geared up to go, you may get a very high PTAL score. But actually, are the services going where you need them to go? Which is why utilising PTAL alongside the origin destination to give a full view of access is a good thing to do. And again, we can use demographic data here to work out how many percentage of my population, how many people in my city live within each of these zones as part of it. And so here we can see 1A and 1B, which are areas that need some improvements to be done, and areas here that are not covered are effectively inaccessible completely. And so actually a lot of improvements need to be made to the transportation network to look at that. And that in just under an hour is kind of TRACC and an overview of TRACC. I do have one more slide talking about the kind of future release of TRACC that's due out in the next couple of months. But I'd like to maybe pause there for a second and answer any sort of questions as they may have hopefully come in, or allow anyone to ask anything, or if you want me to go back over anything, please feel free to ask. Again, you can use the chat panel to ask any questions if you'd like to, or use the Q&A if you'd like to as well. If that's not happening, I will just show the slide about the next features that are coming up, just to kind of be clear of what's happening. So at the moment, I've been demoing version 2.1. We've just gone to a kind of a beta release, an internal beta release of 2.2, which we're kind of testing at the moment. And we've got some great new features coming into this. So we've got a brand new algorithm coming in. It's called Arrive By or Depart At. So at the moment we have windows of access, but if you want to say, actually, I need to be at my desk at 8:45, what time do I need to leave and how long will it take? That'll be in the next version of TRACC. We're also bringing in distances for bus trips and bus times and services. So that'll be in the next version of TRACC. Again, going back to Staffordshire and going back to Accession, which is a product that we used to help manage from 2003 until we developed TRACC. Hanson reports. What a Hanson report effectively does is it applies a scoring to a destination to view how attractive it is. One that's used a lot is jobs as part of this. So someone might be more likely to travel a greater distance to a job if there's more access to employment, so there's more jobs there. And Hanson can effectively give you a score based on that. And that'll be in the next release of TRACC. We've also had many users effectively upgrading from our TRACC desktop license to TRACC Web. This has been done due to COVID and improving access to the software and removing IT departments in some instances, because we manage the whole back end. And what multi-backup will do is allow a user to back up all their projects in one go and then restore them into, for example, a web instance or a new machine in one fell swoop. We have made other improvements to service creation tools, so effectively made it easy to import and create stops and add stops as part of it. The corridor editor we've edited as well, it improves the performance of that, so it runs a lot quicker. Path report route lines I mentioned earlier on as well, and also GTFS. There's been some enhancements with the fare information in there, and also some enhancements with different vehicle types, and that's to be supported from the next release as well of the software. And so, yes, has any questions kind of come in? Yeah, Emma?
Yes, they have, Dan. Thank you, Katie, for your question about will the recording be made available. We will send the recording out to everybody who's attended. I do apologise if you hear that feedback.
Yes, there's a little bit of feedback. Yes, I think we're planning to get the recording onto YouTube, and so that can be shared around with anyone that would like to be shared around. One question that gets asked quite often, so I'm going to ask that anyway, is about support. And so effectively, yes, we do have a ticket-based system that supports TRACC. We've got a couple of great people that work on our support desk who kind of answer any kind of questions and queries. And as was alluded to at the beginning, we do training courses as well. So we do on-site courses for clients when required, and we also have a public course that we run every couple of months here and offices in Guildford. So yeah, they do get run quite a bit.
Any other questions?
So I see someone's asked here, is there a way of inputting a route that we've created? Example, testing how a housing development could be connected to various schools in the settlement using routes. So it depends how that has been created. So if you'd created it and you'd created a CIF file, or you created a GTFS file, or a trans exchange file, we could load that data directly in. If you had a CSV file and that had all the stop locations as part of it, you can load that data in. In the next release, we are effectively bringing into the copy and paste from Excel. So if you had it in an Excel file, you'll be able to paste that timetable into the route as well. So it can all be done in those sort of ways. And the important thing is you can also save routes back out. So actually, if you do it within TRACC and find it easy within TRACC, you can export things out to Excel files, such as the fares and the timetables, and you can also export it out to standard formats, so GTFS. You can export it out to an ACCO CIF or a trans exchange file. If you had just lines of information, you could load that data in for a visual purpose. But yeah, if you had the stops as part of a CSV file or an Excel file, they can be loaded into the system as well. I hope that answers your question. Someone else we also asked us about availability of data internationally. So we obviously have many UK offices that do work on behalf of clients all over the world. There's a great website called Transitland. Transitland is a website that effectively allows you to go on and download GTFS data for anywhere in the world. It's how our clients in North America and Australia and Europe utilize the software. For the road data as well, OpenStreetMap is a good source of international standardized data, but you have then commercial providers. So you've got effectively here and TomTom is the two big ones, and there's a new provider that's supported by TomTom, which is Open Data, which I've forgotten the name of, but effectively that data can be exported as a shapefile and utilised within within TRACC as well. So there's lots of different formats. We are working on expanding our data cutter service. If you've not seen data cutter at all, it's really worthwhile having a look into. In the UK, you can download census data free of charge. You can download premium data sets as well. We have many users utilise that to access their transportation needs. But we're actually working on an international version of that. So we hope that at some point early next year, we'll be able to offer a data cutter service internationally. They can give access to OpenStreetMap data, GTFS data, and so on. So we're actually developing that as we speak. The OSM component is pretty much done, and we're about to move on to GTFS. So not in 2.2, but I hope it's at 2.3. You have to draw an area within TRACC and say get data, and effectively all that data will be pulled down via an API call and utilised directly within TRACC. So again, helping aid access to that data going forwards.
Is there any other questions? Nope. Okay, I'd like to take this time to say a big thank you to everybody that has joined us here today. Oh, sorry, Joe. We've just had raised his hand. What have we missed? No. Okay, right. I'm having technical difficulties, so I do apologise. I'd like to say thanks again from all of us here at Basemap. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon. Oh, we just caught your question there, Andrew.
Hi, is there a way of inputting a route that we have created? Example, assessing how a housing development can be connected to various schools in a settlement. Yes, certainly. So that's where you can use the OD path files, for example. So if you've created a route, it's like the D1 service that I showed earlier on. Effectively, you could create that manually within the system. And then effectively, you could put the timetable in manually if you knew it, or use the auto trip time generation to show that information. Once you've done that, effectively, Andrew, you've got the data in there, and then you can do your OD analysis to find out actually, what's the improvement in journey time before and after putting that new service in there. You may want to look at, if there's any development, plotting where the roads are. Can you import a shapefile as a route? We can't do that because a route is defined by the stops itself. So we can load a shapefile into the system, and you can use that shapefile as a point shapefile to then determine where the stops are located. But if it's a line of the route, because whilst the bus does follow a line, we need the stops to be the alighting and points as part of it. So you can use that, and then effectively you can draw on top where you want the stops to be. Or what you can do as part of that is, if it's a point file, you can use them as the stops and build up the timetable manually as part of it. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way we can do it. So it depends. If your shapefile is a point shapefile, we can utilize that straight away. If it's a line string shapefile, we don't know where you can and can't get off that service. That's our issue at the moment as part of it. But you can use that to trace and click on where you want the stops to be as part of it, using kind of rules alongside there.
Any more questions?
Yes, I guess unfortunately, yeah, it probably would be a case of drawing. It's not drawing your route, but it'll be plotting where you want the stops to be as part of it. So the route line can be created afterwards, certainly. But yes, unfortunately, we can't load a shapefile because we don't know where the actual lighting points on that stop would be, along that route would be as part of it.
Any more to come in? Okay, thank you again. And as I said, if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.